Here's the part most people never tell you. Amazon was never meant to be a bookstore. Books were simply the camouflage, the first move in a vision so massive, so far ahead of its time, that if Jeff Bezos had revealed the entire plan from day one, people wouldn't have called him ambitious. They would have called him insane. What began as a modest online experiment quietly evolved into a force that now weaves itself into nearly every corner of your life. That box waiting at your door, the series you can't stop watching, the voice answering questions in your living room, and even the website you're on at this very moment. There's a strong chance Amazon is powering all of it behind the scenes. But the transformation from a scrappy online bookseller into the most influential company on earth didn't happen smoothly, or safely, or predictably. It was a journey packed with moments where Amazon came terrifyingly close to collapse, where Bezos placed bets so reckless they looked like guaranteed failure, and where decisions that made absolutely no sense to the outside world ultimately rewrote the rules of business forever. This is not just the story of a company. It's the story of how one long-term vision, built through chaos, risk, and relentless conviction, turned something small into something that now runs the modern world. Let me take you behind the scenes of the most incredible business transformation in modern history. We're going to uncover the hidden strategies, the almost failures that could have killed Amazon before it even got started, and the brilliant moves that nobody saw coming. Because understanding how Amazon built their empire isn't just about business history. It's about recognizing the patterns of massive success and understanding how one person's seemingly impossible vision can reshape the entire world. The year was 1994, and the internet was still this weird, clunky thing that most people barely understood. Jeff Bezos was working at a hedge fund called D.E. Shaw, making serious money analyzing market trends and investment opportunities. He was living the American dream, pulling in a fantastic salary in one of the most prestigious financial firms in New York City. But then he came across a piece of data that changed everything. Web usage was exploding at a rate that had never been seen before in any technology. While his colleagues were focused on traditional investments, Bezos was seeing the future unfold in real time. But here's where the story gets interesting. Bezos didn't just stumble into the book business by accident. He actually created a list of 20 different products he could potentially sell online. He looked at books, music, computer software, office supplies, all sorts of different categories. Books won for some very specific strategic reasons that show just how calculated this whole operation was from day one. Books had millions of titles available, way more than any physical store could ever stock. They were relatively inexpensive, so people wouldn't be too worried about buying them sight unseen. And perhaps most importantly, they didn't spoil, break easily, or require complex customer service. The decision to leave his lucrative Wall Street job wasn't easy. Bezos was walking away from guaranteed success to chase something that most people thought was a fantasy. His boss at D.E. Shaw even told him it sounded like a great idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. But Bezos had developed what he called the regret minimization framework. He imagined himself at 80 years old, looking back on his life, and asked which decision he would regret more: trying this internet thing and failing, or never trying at all and wondering what might have been. So in the summer of 1994, Bezos and his wife Mackenzie packed up their belongings and drove from New York to Seattle. Why Seattle? It wasn't because of some romantic notion about the Pacific Northwest. Bezos had done his homework. Seattle had a large pool of technical talent thanks to Microsoft. It was close to one of the largest book distributors in the country, and perhaps most importantly for a startup trying to avoid paying sales tax, it had a relatively small population, which meant fewer customers would be subject to local tax requirements. The early days of Amazon were absolutely chaotic in the best possible way. Bezos set up shop in the garage of his rented house in Bellevue. He built the first desks himself out of old wooden doors and 4x4s because it was cheaper than buying real office furniture. The first employees had to get on their hands and knees to pack books because they couldn't afford proper packing tables. Every order was a celebration because it meant someone somewhere had actually found their little website and trusted them enough to hand over their credit card information. But even in those early garage days, Bezos was thinking way beyond books. He chose the name Amazon specifically because it started with the letter A, which would put it at the top of alphabetical listings. But more importantly, he wanted a name that reflected the scale of his true ambitions. The Amazon River is the largest river in the world, and Bezos envisioned building the largest store in the world. He even registered the domain name relentless.com, which still redirects to Amazon today. That wasn't a coincidence. Bezos knew that relentless focus and execution would be the key to everything he wanted to accomplish. The first sale happened on July 16, 1995. A guy named John Wainwright bought a book called Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies. It wasn't exactly a bestseller, but it represented something much bigger than a single transaction. It proved that people would actually buy books from a website, which sounds obvious now but was absolutely revolutionary at the time. Most people still thought the internet was just a fad for computer nerds and college students. But the real genius of Amazon's early strategy wasn't just about selling books online. Bezos was already collecting data on customer behavior in ways that traditional bookstores never could. Every click, every search, every purchase was giving Amazon insights into what people actually wanted to read. They could track which books people looked at but didn't buy, how long people spent on different pages, what recommendations actually led to sales. This data would later become one of Amazon's most powerful competitive advantages. The growth in those first few years was absolutely explosive. Amazon went from $0 to $1 million in sales in just 2 years. They were shipping books to all 50 states and 45 countries around the world. The garage quickly became too small, so they moved to a real office space. Then they outgrew that space and had to move again. They were hiring new people almost every week just to keep up with the orders flooding in. But success brought its own set of challenges that nobody had anticipated. The book industry had never seen anything like Amazon before, and traditional publishers and bookstores didn't know how to react. Some publishers were excited about this new sales channel that could reach customers they never would have reached otherwise. Others were terrified that Amazon would somehow destroy the traditional book industry. Independent bookstores started viewing Amazon as an existential threat, which led to some pretty heated confrontations in the media. The real turning point came when Bezos made a decision that seemed absolutely insane to almost everyone around him. Instead of focusing on becoming profitable as quickly as possible like most businesses would, he decided to reinvest every penny back into growth. He wanted to expand the selection, improve the website, build better warehouses, hire more people, and basically do everything possible to create the best customer experience imaginable. This meant that Amazon would lose money for years, which made investors nervous and competitors confused. But Bezos had a theory that would later be proven absolutely correct. He believed that in the early days of internet commerce, scale would be everything. The company that could grow the fastest and capture the most market share would have insurmountable advantages later on. They could negotiate better deals with suppliers, invest more in technology, and create a customer experience that smaller competitors simply couldn't match. It was a massive gamble, but it was based on a deep understanding of how network effects work in digital businesses. The initial public offering in May 1997 was another pivotal moment in Amazon's history. The company raised $54 million. Which gave them the capital they needed to accelerate their expansion plans. But going public also meant that Bezos now had to answer to shareholders who wanted to see profits, not just growth. The tension between short-term profitability and long-term vision would become a defining characteristic of Amazon's corporate culture. Bezos used the IPO as an opportunity to articulate his long-term vision more clearly than ever before. In his first letter to shareholders, he wrote about building a lasting company that would be measured in decades, not quarters. He talked about obsessing over customers rather than competitors. He emphasized that they would make bold investment decisions that might not pay off for years. Most importantly, he warned investors that if they were looking for predictable quarterly profits, Amazon probably wasn't the right investment for them. This customer obsession wasn't just marketing speak. Amazon was genuinely doing things that seemed financially irrational in the short term, but created incredible value for customers. They offered free shipping on orders over a certain amount, which cut into their margins but made customers more likely to purchase. They built massive warehouses in locations that were optimized for fast delivery rather than low costs. They hired way more customer service representatives than seemed necessary because they wanted every interaction to exceed customer expectations. But perhaps the most important decision Bezos made during this period was to start thinking beyond books. He had always planned for Amazon to become an everything store, and by 1998, he was ready to start making that vision a reality. The expansion into music and movies seemed like a natural progression since they were similar products that could be sold using the same infrastructure and customer base. However, each new product category brought its own unique challenges and opportunities. Music had different suppliers, different customer expectations, and different competitive dynamics. The same was true for movies, electronics, toys, and every other category they eventually entered. Amazon had to become experts in dozens of different industries simultaneously, which required hiring people with specialized knowledge and building new systems and processes for each vertical. The late 90s were also when Amazon started making some of its most controversial strategic decisions. They began spending massive amounts of money on television advertising, warehouse construction, and international expansion. The company was burning through cash at a rate that made many investors extremely nervous. Amazon's stock price became incredibly volatile, swinging wildly based on quarterly earnings reports and analyst predictions about the future of e-commerce. But Bezos remained focused on the long-term vision even when the short-term outlook seemed pretty scary. He believed that the internet would eventually become the primary way people shopped for most products, and he wanted Amazon to be positioned as the obvious choice when that transformation happened. This required building infrastructure and capabilities far in advance of when they would actually be profitable, which was a very different approach from how most businesses operated. The dot-com crash of 2000 and 2001 was probably the most dangerous period in Amazon's entire history. Technology stocks collapsed across the board, and many internet companies that had been valued at billions of dollars suddenly went bankrupt. Amazon's stock price fell from over $90 per share to less than $10. Suddenly, all those concerns about profitability didn't seem so unreasonable anymore. The company had to lay off employees for the first time, and there were serious questions about whether Amazon would survive at all. But this crisis also revealed the strength of the foundation that Bezos had been building for years. While many dot-com companies were essentially just websites with no real business model, Amazon had built a genuine infrastructure for e-commerce. They had warehouses, distribution networks, customer relationships, and operational expertise that couldn't just disappear overnight. When weaker competitors went out of business, Amazon was able to gain market share even during the worst economic conditions. The recovery from the dot-com crash marked the beginning of Amazon's transformation from an online retailer into something much more ambitious and complex. Bezos started talking more openly about his vision for Amazon as a technology company that happened to sell products, rather than a retail company that happened to use technology. This shift in perspective would lead to some of the most important innovations in Amazon's history. One of the most significant developments during this period was the launch of Amazon Web Services. What started as an internal project to make Amazon's own technology infrastructure more efficient eventually became one of the most important cloud computing platforms in the world. The idea was simple. If Amazon had to build massive, scalable, reliable computing systems for their own business, why not offer those same services to other companies who needed similar capabilities? But AWS represented something much deeper than just a new product line. It showed that Amazon was serious about becoming a fundamental piece of internet infrastructure, not just a place where people bought books and DVDs. They were building the digital equivalent of electricity or water utilities, providing essential services that other businesses needed to operate in the modern economy. The introduction of Amazon Prime in 2005 was another masterstroke that completely changed customer expectations about online shopping. For an annual fee, customers could get free 2-day shipping on millions of items. From a financial perspective, Prime seemed like a terrible idea. Amazon was essentially paying for expensive expedited shipping and hoping that customers would order enough additional items to make up for the loss. But Prime wasn't really about shipping economics. It was about changing customer behavior and creating a psychological commitment to Amazon as the default choice for online purchases. Prime members started buying more items, more frequently, across more product categories. They became less price-sensitive because they felt like they were already getting value from their membership. Most importantly, they stopped comparison shopping as much because the convenience and speed of Amazon Prime was worth more than saving a few dollars elsewhere. The success of Prime also demonstrated the power of Amazon's long-term thinking. While competitors were focused on quarterly profits, Amazon was building systems and programs that would pay off over years or even decades. Prime membership became a moat around Amazon's retail business that was incredibly difficult for competitors to replicate or overcome. Meanwhile, Amazon was quietly revolutionizing another industry that most people didn't even know existed. The company had been building massive warehouses and distribution centers to fulfill their own orders, but they realized that the same infrastructure could be used to help other businesses sell and ship their products. The Amazon Marketplace allowed third-party sellers to list their products on Amazon's website and use Amazon's fulfillment network to handle storage, packing, and shipping. This marketplace business was brilliant for several reasons. It expanded Amazon's product selection without requiring them to buy inventory or take financial risk on products that might not sell. It generated revenue from seller fees and commissions rather than just retail margins. And it created network effects where more sellers attracted more customers, which attracted even more sellers, creating a virtuous cycle of growth. But perhaps most importantly, the marketplace gave Amazon unprecedented visibility into what products were selling well and which sellers were most successful. This data became incredibly valuable for Amazon's private label business, where they could identify successful products and create their own versions to compete directly with third-party sellers. This strategy was controversial and led to accusations that Amazon was using its platform unfairly, but it was undeniably effective from a business perspective. The launch of the Kindle in 2007 marked Amazon's entry into hardware manufacturing and digital content distribution. The device itself was impressive, with wireless connectivity that allowed customers to download books instantly without connecting to a computer. But the real innovation was the business model that made digital books cheaper and more convenient than physical books, while still generating healthy profits for Amazon. The Kindle also demonstrated Amazon's willingness to disrupt its own business when necessary. Physical book sales were still a significant part of Amazon's revenue, but Bezos was willing to cannibalize that business in order to establish Amazon as the leader in digital publishing. This kind of strategic thinking, where long-term positioning trumps short-term profits, became a hallmark of Amazon's approach to new markets. As Amazon grew larger and more successful, the company faced increasing scrutiny from regulators, competitors, and critics who argued that it had become too powerful. The antitrust concerns weren't entirely unfounded. Amazon's scale and scope gave it enormous influence over suppliers, customers, and even competitors who relied on its marketplace and cloud services. But Bezos consistently argued that Amazon's size and power were beneficial for consumers and the broader economy. Lower prices, faster delivery, better selection, and constant innovation were the results of Amazon's competitive advantages, not anti-competitive behavior. The company's willingness to operate at thin margins and reinvest profits into new capabilities created value for customers that couldn't be replicated by smaller, less efficient competitors. The acquisition strategy that Amazon pursued over the years reflected this same long-term thinking. Rather than buying companies for immediate financial returns, Amazon typically acquired businesses that added new capabilities or accelerated their entry into new markets. The purchase of Whole Foods brought Amazon into physical retail and grocery delivery. The acquisition of Twitch gave them a foothold in gaming and live streaming. Ring added home security to their smart home ecosystem. Each acquisition was part of building what Bezos called the flywheel effect. Better customer experience led to more customers, which attracted more sellers, which expanded selection and improved the customer experience even further. More customers and sellers generated more data, which enabled better recommendations and more efficient operations. Higher volumes led to lower costs, which enabled lower prices and an even better customer experience. The development of Alexa and the Echo smart speakers represented another major expansion of Amazon's ambitions. Voice computing was clearly going to be the next major platform shift in technology, and Amazon wanted to establish itself as the leader before Apple, Google, or Microsoft could dominate the space. The Echo wasn't just a speaker. It was a gateway for Amazon to become part of customers' daily routines in ways that went far beyond shopping. But the real genius of the Alexa strategy was how it connected all of Amazon's different businesses and services. You could use Alexa to order products from Amazon, control smart home devices, play music from Amazon Music, watch content on Fire TV, and access thousands of third-party skills and services. The more you used Alexa, the more valuable Amazon's ecosystem became, and the harder it became to switch to competing products. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 accelerated many trends that were already working in Amazon's favor. As people were forced to stay home and avoid physical stores, online shopping became essential rather than just convenient. Amazon's massive investments in warehouses, delivery networks, and logistics technology suddenly looked incredibly prescient rather than potentially wasteful. During the early months of the pandemic, Amazon hired hundreds of thousands of new employees to handle the surge in orders. They expanded their delivery capacity, prioritized essential items, and worked around the clock to meet unprecedented demand. The company became essential infrastructure for millions of people who needed groceries, medical supplies, and other necessities delivered to their homes. But the pandemic also highlighted some of the criticisms and challenges that Amazon faced as it grew to enormous size and influence. Working conditions in warehouses came under increased scrutiny as employees were asked to work long hours during a global health crisis. The company's market power raised questions about whether any single corporation should have so much control over essential commerce and communication infrastructure. Today, Amazon is no longer just an online retailer or even just a technology company. It's a fundamental piece of the modern economy that touches virtually every industry and every aspect of digital life. Amazon Web Services powers much of the internet. Amazon's retail marketplace connects millions of sellers with hundreds of millions of customers worldwide. Alexa is listening in millions of homes. Prime Video competes with Netflix and traditional television networks. Amazon's logistics network moves billions of packages every year. The transformation from an online bookstore to a $2 trillion everything company represents one of the most remarkable business achievements in history. But it's also a story about the power of long-term thinking, customer obsession, and the willingness to make bold bets on emerging technologies and changing consumer behaviors. What makes Amazon's story so fascinating isn't just the scale of their success, but the consistency of their approach over nearly 3 decades. The same principles that guided Bezos when he was packing books in his garage still drive Amazon's strategy today. Focus on customers, think long-term, embrace innovation, and never be satisfied with the status quo. The question now is whether Amazon can continue growing and innovating at the same pace as it becomes even larger and faces increased competition and regulation. The company is investing heavily in new technologies like artificial intelligence, autonomous delivery, and space exploration through Blue Origin. They're expanding into new markets like healthcare, automotive, and enterprise software. But perhaps the most important lesson from Amazon's incredible journey is that seemingly impossible visions can become reality with the right combination of strategy, execution, and persistence. What started as one person's crazy idea about selling books on the internet became a company that fundamentally changed how the world shops, computes, and communicates. And that transformation happened not through luck or accident, but through decades of deliberate, strategic decisions that prioritized long-term value creation over short-term profits. The story of Amazon's rise is ultimately a story about the power of thinking differently and having the courage to pursue a vision that others think is impossible. In 1994, very few people could have imagined that an online bookstore would eventually become one of the most powerful and influential companies in human history. But Jeff Bezos saw that future and built Amazon to make it happen. One customer and one innovation at a time.